Hey there, and welcome back to Up Next in Commerce. This is your host, Stephanie Postles, CEO at mission.org. Today on the show, we have Catherine Bahamande Manasabian, the President and GM of North America Commerce at Stanley Black & Decker. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. So I was looking through your background, like I always do, and you've worked at some really great places. You've worked at Barney's, Juicy Couture, Lululemon, Alex and Ani. I was going through the list and I was like, whoa, she is a VIP in this industry. I wanted to hear how you kind of got into those companies and what your journey in e-commerce looked like before getting to Stanley Black & Decker.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm always interested when I hear, interview candidates that I always knew I wanted to do, have this career. For me, it was, I really didn't, sort of earlier on have much exposure, really to the broader world or my place in it, or even grasp, what was possible really career-wise. So after college, I actually, started off in investment banking. It seemed like a good thing to do. And then, that experience actually ended up giving me a great business foundation. But later in my career, I transitioned to e-commerce, and, I've worked in a wide range of mostly retail companies, both early stage and mature, at sort of different times in their life cycle. And what I ended up loving about e-commerce is just that it really touches everything. You really have to think about the end-to-end experience. You have to be close to technology. You're driven by numbers. You have to execute, and it's fast paced and not the same job twice. So I wouldn't give it up for the world. I found my calling for sure.
Yeah, I love that. How did you choose the companies that you worked for?
Yeah, so I have always been drawn to kind of change roles. So during inflection points in the company's sort of journey. And so whether it was an early stage startup or whether it was a company trying to transform, I was always drawn to brands with the customer at the center, looking to grow across sort of new business models and such. And so it wasn't necessarily a particular affinity to a particular category. I did spend a lot of time in apparel, but it was more about the the specific opportunity in terms of scope and ability to impact.
Got it. Did you ever get to a company and you reflect back and you're like, that was one of the most challenging times of like working, trying to either start e-commerce or do something new? Like, do any of these companies come to mind where you're like, that was super challenging and hard and the best experience ever?
Well, honestly, I would say they all were, whether it was, sort of more in a build capacity or more, in a more of a turnaround. I think that, the last 10 years, a lot has been written about the retail apocalypse, which was like, 10 years in the making, but I was sort of living through just these really dramatic shifts in consumer behavior and values. And then, expectations just really rising, and, the companies, trying to meet these expectations, which was just really tough structurally. So I think, all of them were challenging in their own right.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so Stanley Black & Decker, they are Fortune 500. I think they're like number 250, 252, something around there. So big company, a lot of employees, and they, of course, make industrial tools. You joined during the pandemic, right? Like in 2020, you joined. I want to hear a bit about what convinced you to join a company that also is, to me, when I hear about them, like mostly maybe male dominated, coming from, apparel and, a different kind of background. What was that driving force to join Stanley Black & Decker?
Yeah, so I mean, what drew me to the company was really, just these incredible brands. So, for those who don't know, like DeWalt, Craftsman, Black and Decker, Stanley, Lennox, I'm sure I'm missing some, but just this company that's just this powerhouse, number one in the industry. It's been around for almost 200 years, which means you have to innovate to be around that long. Global, 60 countries, so all of the sort of the benefits of a very well-run, profitable, kind of performance-driven organization. But also, at the same time, and I didn't appreciate it as much, outside in, at the beginning, but really looking to transform and, at this scale. And a lot of the skills that I picked up, through retail, the hitting consumers from every angle, sort of managing again the technology and the data, and the marketing, and sort of the consumerization that took place, in retailers, being able to apply that skill set to manufacturers who are now at the tip of the spear, starting that customer journey. I thought was just really exciting for me. And one other thing that that I think is we're very proud of is that just the company's focus on purpose, and just diversity and sustainability and all the things that you can put a list on the wall, but that are really embedded in the DNA and the culture of the company, made it just really attractive. And you mentioned the male dominated, and you're right, manufacturing and tools specifically are like being a pilot or being in technology. They're just not the typical, the female representation isn't as high as as other industries. But coming as a woman in a senior level from a different industry, I've really not had any challenges. The tone is really set at the top, and the company's consistently ranked as one of the best employers for women.
Wow, that's awesome. So did you kind of have like a handy background before you entered there? Because I heard all, the names that you were saying, and I'm like, I feel like I might know what that tool is, but I'm just imagining my dad right now with his tool belt. I'm like, I can't really, figure out which one that is. Like, did you have a background in that, or was it completely new coming from like the apparel scene before this?
No, it was actually completely new. And to add to that, I live in the middle of Manhattan, so I don't really have a yard.
Yeah.
The elves kind of, when something's broken, you call, and the elves kind of fix it.
Yep.
So it was a steep learning curve for sure in terms of in terms of product. But having we're 1, 2, or 3 in every category that we're in, so that helps. Just being number one helps. And so but it was from a product perspective, quite a leap from apparel.
Yep. Yeah, I think my 3-year-old knows more names of tools than I do, and he'll correct me. Same thing with trucks. He's like, that one is not an excavator, Mom. I'm like, okay. All right, that's like some kind of ratchet. All right, thanks, Grayson. So what did your first 90 days look like at the company? Like, did you go in with a plan where you're like, I've done this before, and then it went as planned, or how did you think about, when you first joined?
No, I mean, the skill sets, as I mentioned, are highly, highly transferable. But my role was new to the organization, and I definitely took the time my first few months to really define my scope and really understand our operations, dive into our business. Our goal, which we've stated publicly, is to more than double our online sales in just a couple of years.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of, sort of diving deep into our commercial accounts, marketplaces, just looking at our social and customer touch points, new business models, B2B transactions and such. So it was a little bit, sort of listen and learn at the beginning. And also, just the way to go to market is very different from, a retailer where you sort of, you manage everything. So in my prior roles, I had technology, I had marketing, I had, I had almost the entire merchandise. I had the entire piece of the business, going from that to, highly global and matrixed organization, just a very different way of operating the same sort of end experience, the customer at the core, and, the same objectives, but a very different way of sort of execution.
Yeah. And I think I was looking through one of your guys' investor presentations where I was talking about the model for like, we're focusing on B2B, B2C, and like D2C. And we're thinking about all of those as being, where we want to head over this next year or so. How do you put on those different hats, and how do you, meet all of those customers where they want to buy it?
Yeah, prioritization is a big one, in terms of how do we look at sort of all the different potential, value drivers, and how do we prioritize, against the highest impact ones. We are definitely looking at, basically doubling down with our retail partners, and then also exploring kind of new business models. But there's a lot of like foundational work, which isn't the most glamorous or, strategic, but we're doing a lot of just capability building to enable the scale that we want to get to. This is like our studio and our content, our
Mm-hmm.
analytics and reporting, demand planning, customer service. Of like, we just are putting in an entirely new MarTech stack. So there's a lot of, it's beyond just a stated intention. Like, we're actively investing against that foundation that will then enable all of those different business models that you rattled off, B2B, B2C, over the course of the next few years.
Yeah. So around all the new things that you're implementing, it seems like all of that would be new if kind of like your role was new in this company. They didn't really have a big focus on this beforehand. So which parts do you think are going to be, I mean, I'm sure they're all very important, but which ones are you most excited about and you're like betting big on right now? You're like, this is going to change the way the whole company operates, or this is going to see the biggest ROI when it comes to, online sales and whatever it may be.
Well, we have, again, as I mentioned, a very broad scope that ranges from looking at things like content and drop ship to some, again, social selling and distribution and again, doubling down with our key partnerships in North America, which are exceptionally strong. But one that I'm very passionate about is content. Yeah. And I know that, it's sort of like just to play, but for us, it's very, important in that, customers and, the end consumer are now looking to manufacturers for, just to really understand, the product. So much of the role of, sort of digital influence with now post-COVID, it's, estimated to be even higher, the number of transactions that begin, on digital channels, regardless of where the actual transaction is made. So we have a very big investment in content. This includes, sort of what samples we shoot off in the milestone process, to how we, deliver that content to, all of our different distribution channels, to more enhanced and experiential content. So it's a very big undertaking for the last, I would say, 5 months, and we're expecting to start to see results in Q3 of this year.
Oh, cool. So we've had a lot of brands on here talk about content. We've got, brands who are making their own branded content, like working on Netflix series. We've got brands that are building their entire content platforms, like kind of like a Netflix, that they're using AI and ML and it's being trained and all that. It feels like it's just kind of like Netflix. Other people just focusing on TikTok or Instagram. What do you think is going to be most impactful? You said you're going to start seeing results. Like, what kind of content are you guys really leaning into, and who is it going after? Who's it targeting right now?
So, our customer base spans, professionals, the pros, to tradespeople, to, DIY makers. So we have, a diversity in terms of who that end user is. But, as I mentioned, they're all looking for, inspiration, education, product information, pre and post customer care. So we are, starting with the basics. So sort of, what our, sort of core e-commerce content is. We have a lot of, A/B testing happening right now to really understand the true return. With our scale, it's less intuitive than being at a more early stage company where you kind of have line of sight to the full business. We really have to look across all of our different distribution channels, globally, to really understand what the right investment is, from a sort of a sales, lift perspective. And then we're looking at, I can't disclose much yet, but we are looking at, enhanced content, which is more along the lines of what you were saying, sort of borrowing from some of the learnings we have, in global markets, which are more advanced than we are, progressive in terms of mobile and social and such. But, we're really, looking to kind of disrupt ourselves and to, take a fresh look at, at how we represent our brands online and how we go to market.
Yeah, it seems like there could be such a big area for impact around partnering with, all the DIY type of people, the Chip and Joanna Gaines, like all the influencers. I mean, there's this one woman on TikTok that I watch where she'll redo someone's entire bedroom. And I watch her and I'm like, what exactly were you using at that? Because just tell me exactly what it is and I'll just get that and I'll know it'll work. But it seems like there's a lot of opportunities popping up now that are outside just the traditional like TV ads, and I mean, which still apparently work, at least, from what I've heard on here, but there's a lot of little micro opportunities that could probably have a lot of lift and reach people that you maybe wouldn't have otherwise.
Absolutely.
Are you open to channels like TikTok and things like that? Or are you still kind of staying more traditional, like Facebook or even like Super Bowl commercials, which apparently have also a big lift?
Yeah, so I think, we are, looking to, the status quo, everything is up for debate. I think, one thing that, being in a large global, as you said, Fortune 250 company, the stakes are high. There's a lot to lose with, sort of our appetite for risk. So it's a constant conversation that we're having. I'm sure other CPGs have the same. I'm just thinking about tolerance for risk. Like, if you think about it, manufacturing is, I have 100% of the information, and I have kind of longer lead times, and I, am very efficient. That's like the opposite of what you're suggesting, which is, let's test something out. Let's see if it works. And, if it doesn't, then we move to something else.
Yeah.
And let's work in, the return isn't necessarily there from an ROI perspective up front, because we're basically understanding that maybe it's a data play. Maybe it's, it's okay if it fails. Like, all of these things are very, very intuitive for companies that are, early stage, or that, sort of are, have a different sort of origin and history, are new. So I think when you're asking, like, are we open to TikTok? Are we open to these channels? We're open to, definitely, to the conversation, and we are speaking internally and really getting a sense of what our appetite is for risk, and how we mitigate against sort of risk, and how we think about investments, and how we think about speed as our business model shifts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole different model when you've got so many eyes kind of watching it, like, how'd that pay off? How'd it pay off? Let me hear the ROI versus this marketing campaign. Very different than like a new D2C company that can just move quick and break things and say sorry later. And no one will probably even notice. So the one thing that seems really tricky too with a company of, Black & Decker size is attribution around these campaigns. What are some good best practices when trying to measure, the ROI of marketing efforts or e-commerce efforts or any of that?
Yeah, so attribution is a very is very top of mind. We have a big effort around data and insights, which then goes into AI and predictive analytics. So a very robust effort around data. We've recently, as I mentioned, invested around our MarTech backbone. This is a CDP, a PIM, and a DAM, like looking at our ESP and our chat and social listening, and all of sort of those marketing automation that will help us, get smarter about, what the impact of our different efforts is. So I think we're early in our journey, and it is tricky, unlike, retailers that you sort of have a lot of the data, firsthand. There is, a lot of our sales come through our retail partners. So, building those relationships with the end user and really leveraging the POS data that we do get is just a little bit of a different, exercise than it is, in kind of more direct businesses. But attribution is something that we're very keen on understanding, and the goal is to be extremely data driven, and really, again, understand the value, even if it's not a pure revenue, so we can prioritize our efforts.
Yeah, it's always interesting, especially thinking about how to access your customer when you do work heavily through retailers. We had on Anheuser-Busch, and they cannot talk one-to-one with their customers. It's just part of the three-tier alcohol industry. And it was interesting hearing about kind of the creative solutions they were making around that, around giveaways, around concerts, like anything that would kind of be like, okay, you had our beer, and now we're going to bring you into our community and start creating a conversation so that we do get that one-to-one access. Is there any kind of like creative or fun things that you're trying out right now to have like more conversations and generate engagement and create a community?
We are, unfortunately, haven't talked about it publicly to date, but it's very analogous to the examples that you've given. Like, how do you take the touch points that you do have, whether they be customer service, warranty, social, and how do you build one-to-one relationships and communities? And really, we're all at the end of the day in service of those customers, regardless of, how we go to market. So being creative is definitely a key element of our strategy.
Yeah. So with everything around the pandemic, so COVID obviously made a lot of people want to come home and work on things. Home improvement was spiking. Anything DIY was spiking. What kind of quick changes did you have to make? Because I'm assuming maybe you came in and you're like, all right, here's kind of, I'm going to observe, I'm going to see the org, I'm going to talk to the people, and then we're going to do this. To then maybe have to be like, and pivot again. Like things are, everything's up and to the right. Everyone wants to be home right now and fixing their house. What kind of quick changes were you able to possibly make around maybe increased demand?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the charts of like the biggest winners and losers in COVID. I think
Yeah.
apparel was at the bottom, and I think DIY was at the top. So, so definitely a huge boom, and one that I don't think anyone could have really anticipated. We've disclosed publicly, like e-com represented 18% of our business last year and went up 5 points just in that year.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Because I think I saw 8% back in 2019 was like the share. So that's awesome. Good growth.
Yes. And, so to your point, it's about meeting that demand. So there's a lot of creative things, when you have, with performance market, there's a lot of things you have to do to pivot to adjust to, to the commercial realities. But I think like more important than just meeting the demand, I think what COVID did for us was just like handed us permission to double down. So on this incredibly big base, we now have set out to double our business over the next few years. And, we don't want to just take share. We want to grow the category. And because we are, number one globally by, a 3 times factor, in terms of in tools and storage, like we're in this phenomenal position to really, seize the opportunity. So, we're well positioned. I think it's been shown like companies that act swiftly after a crisis, like end up reaping the rewards. So we're not retrenching. We are definitely, doubling down. It's one of the biggest commitments and priorities at the company.
Yeah. And what about forecasting? Because I can imagine, a lot of people get really excited about DIY. I even think about some of the things that I got, and then I kind of was like, okay, it seems a little hard. Pinterest fails just running through my mind. I'm like, I probably shouldn't try and do this myself. But how do you think about forecasting in a time when you have seen all this, really crazy increased demand? Everyone wants to do it now. Are you kind of like going to keep that trend, going, or do you have a point where you're kind of pulling back a bit of like, okay, things might normalize a bit, or, we need to think of other ways to increase the lifetime value, re-engage these people, bring them, in a different way? How are you thinking about the next year or two?
Yeah, so I get asked that a lot. What is the what is the future? Like how much of this is sort of permanent, and what's going to stick and what's going to not, and when do you kind of shift strategies to exactly along the lines that you're saying, to more of retention and engagement and loyalty and such. And I always say I wish I had a crystal ball, because I do think like I'm personally not going to be lining up for Black Friday deals ever again, and I'll probably stay in yoga pants. But but I personally believe that some of the changes that have been like in ecom, not just our category but more broadly, are really signaling like an entirely new phase of growth. And I really don't think things will ever be the same, even after mass vaccination. And so I think we're very bullish internally, that, while there, may be some shifts, like in terms of what we call e-commerce, this kind of hybrid selling. We've seen the curbside pickup and the BOPUS and all of the, the payment, such as all of the innovation that's happened, at the home centers. We've seen, what it's prompted. But I really don't think that we're going to see. I think we're going to see some permanent shifts in terms of digital being that that new front door for our category. So we continue to, remain very bullish.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see the retailers having to also think about, especially around home improvement, shifting their mindset. I mean, the other day I was talking with someone who said that essentially contractors were doing buy online, pick up like on the curb or something similar to that. And that I think it was like a Home Depot or something, all their employees were trying to get stuff for these contractors where they were, on the floor for 2 hours trying to gather this pretty large contractor's order. And it's like, well, why would I ever go in or even send one of my, employees in there to do that when I can just have the retailers working for me? And we've had some, strong opinions both ways around like, that's still going to stay versus we had on Wolseley, which is like a big HVAC B2B type company. And she was essentially saying that she didn't see big home improvement stores needing to have as much inventory and warehouse anymore, and kind of being more like a guide shop, placing orders online. Like, why do you need to go in there and find the exact, screws or plumbing pieces that you need? It should all just be ready when you get there. How do you view the world of retail when it comes to that?
So, when it comes to like B2B, which that's what that is, like the pro and contractors and such, I think that, I think that it's like 70% of the workforce is going to be like millennial and Gen Z. And like these people that are making the purchasing decisions, they're not going to do it like in old ways. They want the experiences that they have in their personal life when they get things quick and convenient and have price transparency and can do it 24. All the things that sort of we B2C has sort of led the way. I think the next frontier is these is B2B in that way. And so I think that maybe it's not that specifically, but I do think that retailers will have to continue to reinvent to meet these like, very, difficult expectations.
Yeah.
And I think that what we now like kind of put in a box, like curbside versus, that is kind of going to get very, very, very blurry. And even the attribution of what we call e-commerce is getting very blurry, which makes determining investment return very, very difficult. Like when you think about things like content, like it's not really the return on the e-com transaction. So I actually think, that that there will be continued, kind of shifts in expectations, and that a lot of this behavior will take on a form that we can't even envision now. And I think the next 5 years are going to bring unprecedented change.
Yeah, I always continue to think about the role of curation with these, especially huge stores like the Lowe's, the Home Depots. I want to go in there and have an experience, and I want to get something there that I can't get online. Like I can get online and order whatever tools, my TikTok video told me to get. But what I can't get is if I go in there and there's like certain reviews or little maybe like, scan this code and you can see a certain video that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, or just thinking of ways to keep me engaged and walk away with some kind of experience or having some kind of curation in retail that I couldn't get online. I mean, I think about why do I even go to the, Pottery Barns, the West Elms, even sometimes TJ Maxx's, like because certain ones have certain kinds of curation. And I think that could be a big thing going forward, but it feels really hard to crack that. I even think about the Amazon bookstores when they, they had the little reviews from the individual employees, or they picked a review off of Amazon's website. And that to me was very engaging, seeing which ones they picked, but then thinking about how to scale that and, stay on top of it feels hard.
Yeah, I mean, you need something different, which is why I think, there's going to be a lot more innovation. Like you need to, there's going to be services? Like what is the new mall, like is a place you go with your family to like have fun from the day. You see like precedents, in China and other areas that are sort of, of what shopping like really is. But I think what makes it hard, back to your comment about attribution, is now the like consideration and the purchase are like not linked. So it makes it even harder, because like you got all of your, inspiration and everything online, and then you're going in store not to sort of consider and browse and be cross-sold. You're going in with more intentionality potentially, or not. So it's created these like very strange journeys that are just, again, really hard to organize around structurally.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting way to put it, that your inspiration of when you find something is not maybe linked to when you're in the store. I think about that all the time, even with recipes and things. It's like I go in there and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make this one Thai thing, and I get in there, I'm like, what am I here for again? Like, where do I find my tab where my recipe was? And it's, yeah, how do you keep that person engaged all the way through to really push them past the finish line and not be like me, where I'm like, oh, tomatoes, I need tomatoes. Like, that's not part of my recipe, but I just am all the way over in a different aisle and I didn't come here for that. And yesterday I walked out and I didn't have any of the stuff I needed. I'm like, this needs to be better, but I don't know how to improve on this.
Absolutely.
It could be a me thing though. So the one thing I want to kind of circle back to too, that I didn't touch on enough, but I was just thinking about the female engagement of the workforce, which I think is so important, especially around, certain fields that maybe are male dominated. How do you think about bringing in great talent? How do you recruit great people? And how do you encourage people to step up? Oftentimes females, I think I've read a stat when I was back at Google where they said that females won't apply to a job unless they're like 90% qualified, where men will apply when they're like 60% qualified or something. So
I've driven past a retailer. I know retail.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think I've heard of that store before. Apply. How do you think about encouraging, badass females to apply and work for you all and be the, top place to work? I think you said that you guys were one of the top places to work for women. Like, how do you even go about creating that culture?
Yeah, this is one that's like really hits me hard just on a personal level, just because, I think everyone knows at this point the impact of the pandemic on women, like, and, that it could take a long time to get out of this, over like 2 million women just have left their jobs.
Yeah.
And so I think that, that it's very important. Half of the talent pool are women. We need those voices in that seat at the table. And I really do think women like change the dynamic, of corporate America. It was essentially designed like pre-technology, like if you think about like when corporate even offices and sort of structures, patterns of interaction were designed, it was just a completely different point in time. So I think, kind of blowing that up and kind of thinking with the fresh sheet of paper is one thing. We're taking a hard look at sort of the future of work in the office and and that helps with attracting like women who sometimes can't like reload their family, to take a GM role of a country or such. But I think that, for attracting, incredible talent, we, have had a big effort. And I think that, the remote work has helped. We've now had access to just incredible talent. I think my team is in 15 states and 1 Canadian province. So we, time zones is a little difficult. And, there are some challenges, with building culture and bringing in more junior people and getting them, acclimated. And, so there are some challenges, but I think that's a big piece of it. But I think that really the tone just has to be set at the top. I don't know that you can like dictate a culture and like, you kind of have to live it. And, the fact that our leadership team has made it very, very clear, unapologetically, that we stand for nothing other than, than gender parity, than social justice. We had empathy principles. I told my husband, I thought it was the most, I said, you've got to be kidding me. This is incredible. Work-life principles that the most senior leaders have made like very public pledges, to really respect, the folks who are bearing the brunt of the pandemic in many senses. And so we don't lose that talent. So I think there are a lot of, different, sort of angles that we're pursuing as a company, from flexibility to, return to work after 2 years off, to like a lot of more formal programs. But I'm not sure that you can, I think a lot of it is just sort of cultural and the tone being set. And, the over communication about how, the values that I guess that we espouse as a company.
Yeah, I love that. I think also, like you said earlier, empathy is such a big thing, because you can have, messages from the top about what's okay and flexibility and all that. But a lot of times it actually depends on your coworkers. I mean, if I were to say, hey, just like right now, all 3 kids are sick right now. All 3 of my kids are sick. Like, I can't come in. What do you feel from them? Like, how do you encourage empathy among all of your, employees who want to lift you up and support you, instead of being like, Steph's kids are sick again. Like, this is like the 3rd time in a month, which it may be. Like, you never know. And I think figuring out how to develop that among the, your entire team seems like a much
Yeah,
more
and I
grassroots
think
effort.
what helps is the male ally. So we have
Yeah.
something that we really want is to leave loudly. So
Mhm.
I historically, I have no problem balancing my personal life. I just say I have a commitment, I can't make it.
Yeah.
I, have a conflict. But now I don't. I make an effort to say I have to take my daughter to the doctor,
Mhm.
and that's okay. And so it's also, also like setting the example that that your life is balanced with, with a lot of other commitments, and we want you to be a whole person. And that our job as leaders is to like, and stop asking women to change, is to is to let us change and make, best tap into the diversity of, of thought and sort of, you know it, life commitments. And so I think that unless we figure this out, I fundamentally think you can't legislate to get out of the wage gap. Like you can't have, policy. Like you really need to, make real meaningful changes within the place that we spend all of our time, that gives us meaning to our lives. They've shown how important work is to, to identity and such, and really create the space for true belonging.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also the best companies will be the ones who think long term around that. I mean, that's why I always look back at my time at Google and respect the teams that I worked for so much, because I remember I was in at the finance group for Maps, and I was switching over to like a PM type of role for augmented reality and Street View. And I was 8 months pregnant when they were recruiting me. And I was like, do y'all see this? Like, I will only have a matter of, I mean, weeks, 2 weeks maybe, to work with you guys. And, I'm really interested. And I mean, they were trying to pull me over to their team. I'm like, but I'm only going to be here 2 weeks. And then we have a very good maternity policy, and you get up maybe, a couple weeks off beforehand. Like, is this okay? And they're like, yeah, of course it is. Like, we want you long term, and you being gone, the company will still run, things will be fine. But we're excited when you get back here, and we want you to come back when you're ready, and your spot will be here. And I just remember being like,
Incredible.
whoa, like that's the kind of org this is, long-term thinking. It's not around like, oh, it's going to be hard for a couple months. Like, it's none of that. It's like, of course, everything will be fine, but we'll be here when you're ready to come back, which, yeah, I respect
I
it.
do think those are the companies that will win.
Yeah.
Employees will feel like they're part of something. They'll be more engaged.
Hmm.
I don't just think like it's fair and it's like the right thing to do. Like it is 100% a business advantage.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Love that. All right.